That's a good start. Yes, that's why we're here. I'll give a quick recap to Chrissie. I'm sure you're quite well versed. One incredible athlete, 4-time Ironman world champion, as Warren said, unbeaten 13 from 13 at the iron distance, and kind of just got better and better. She's engaged to probably the nicest man for me in triathlon, Mr. Tom Lowe, fine triathlete himself, fantastic in co, probably the second fastest Brit in Hawaii. And she's also the reigning women's champion in man versus horse, where she probably took down Warren, is that correct?
Significantly. Yeah. I would have done an interview afterwards, but you were already at home and I still finished.
Okay. So look, it's not a history lesson. We're here to talk about optimising your performance, and that's why we got Chrissie. And I personally think you couldn't find anyone better to talk about that, and I'm going to give you 2 examples, and I'm sure they'll be familiar ones to you, but I think it's worth going over these. Now, 2011, Challenge Roth, arguably the best triathlon, if you don't know, probably the best triathlon in the world, certainly the finest supported triathlon in the world. You probably agree with that one, wouldn't you? We've got over 2.4 miles swim, we've got 49.49. A bike, 112 miles, 4 hours, 40 minutes, and a 2:44 marathon off the back of that. It's even quicker than me, that one. Now,
I was worried
that's the world record. It's not just the world record. I had to look this one up, but the next fastest lady ever is Caroline Steffen, who's done an 8:34 in Melbourne. So that's 16 minutes faster than any lady has ever gone over an iron distance, to try and give some perspective to that. Now, that was Chrissie, absolutely her finest, and yet, that's still not her best performance. I don't think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I think her best performance came some months later at the Ironman World Championships in Kona 2011, where she had to drop out ill the previous year, so she wasn't the defending champion, having won it the 3 years prior to that. Everything's going swimmingly, right? Best shape ever. 2 weeks out from race day, comes off a bike, and torn pectoral and intercostal muscles, taking antibiotics for a fortnight, tries to swim, ends up spending 6 hours in the Kona Community Hospital days before the race,
not an experience,
with a CT scan to check for pulmonary embolism, or if she's got broken ribs, which thankfully she hadn't. I mean, you can go and see the pictures and you can see how beat up and the road rash and everything. So, try and follow the Ironman coverage to watch that race. And now I remember, after a swim of 1:01, Chrissie comes out and there's a great smile on her face. She'd normally swim much quicker than that, as we've said about Rock, but you were just glad to get through the swim, weren't you?
Yeah.
So she's got a beaming smile. She biked 4:56. When she came into T2, she was 21 minutes down on the women's leader. She was 6th, actually, woman onto that run. She then ran a 2:52 to win that race by 3 minutes, and she was being run down by Marinda Caffrey, who ran pretty much exactly the same split as her. And when you finished that, you were done, weren't you? That was like, put a fork in you, you're done. And actually, that was your last competitive race, and you retired. And to me, that is, maybe you could say Paula Radcliffe's 2:15 on the marathon, but that is optimising your performance to some level. So I think, a round of applause for that, because that was... I can't understate how that's just a mind-blowing effort that was. It really was. Anyway, enough blowing smoke on. Right. We're talking about optimising performance, and I know there's a danger that time's going to run away with us here. So we're going to look at some areas where Chrissie's going to give you her experience and where you can obviously take that away, and some of those kind of key points. So the first thing we're going to look at is training, which is obviously the biggie. And when you came to the sport, it's fair to say you were probably quite green. And when you decided to go pro, which was a big decision, and you went into an extremely intense, competitive surroundings, you must have thought, I just got to go hard. But can you talk us through those initial stages and maybe when you thought, actually, that's not right, that's not necessarily the answer?
Yeah, I was an amateur athlete in 2006, and I was fortunate to have a coach in Tim Weeks. He was a great guy. What many people don't know, actually, is in the run-up to the World Age Group Championships, I actually wasn't running. I had a run injury, and so it wasn't running. So the maximum kind of run I was doing was 30 minutes on grass. So it was very swim and bike intensive in the run up to the World Championships with hardly any running. So I amazed myself by managing to win the World Age Group Championships. And at that point, I was juggling training. So I'd say around 25 hours a week with a full-time job, with social life, living in London, with absolutely no intention of ever being a professional athlete.
And you did win that thing overall, though. You didn't just
until I won the World Age Group Championships. Tim introduced me to the person that would become my then coach, and I actually went for a trial run with Brett in Switzerland in the January of that year, and I was so nervous. I'd been sick over Christmas, and I was so incredibly worried about how I'd perform. I guess I come across as quite a confident person, but inside I was trembling, and I really didn't think I could succeed as a professional athlete. And he took one look at me and he said, "Chrissie, after about 3 days, you've got what it takes physically, but I'm going to have to chop your head off." And it was this kind of macabre way of telling me I had a lot of work to do psychologically. And I took the plunge and became a professional athlete. And it wasn't without a lot of angst, actually. And I think we're all scared of making change, and I'm like everyone else. And I was so scared of leaving my job and taking the plunge of becoming a professional athlete. I was so scared of failure. So scared of what people would think, scared of not being able to, pay the bills. But you never want to look back and think, what if? And so I became a professional athlete, and I thought, right, I want to focus on Olympic distance. And Brett essentially trained me as an Olympic distance athlete, so with Olympic distance volume. So my bike rides were, 3 hours, my runs were not longer than, say, 90 minutes. And I was surprised that I didn't find the training, all that difficult. I think I adapted to it quite easily. And then Brett said to me, "Chrissie, do you want to do an Ironman?" And I thought, well, I haven't been doing Ironman training. And so I said to him, "Am I ready?" And he said, yes.
Were you doing the intensity when you were doing the shorter stuff?
And that's the key. And I think there's this misconception in our sport that in order to do triathlon, in order to do endurance events, in order to do Ironman, one needs to have X number of hours logged in the logbook, or you need X number of miles. And actually my strength and my speed and my endurance increased when I reduced the volume of training that I was doing, but increased the intensity. So saying that, we can't all go into doing nothing into, high quality, intense work. We need what we call an endurance base, and I have that endurance base. But once you have that, there is no point in banging out miles and hours of work. It's junk. It's absolute junk. And people think, well, I've logged a 6-hour ride, hence I'll be fit enough to do that in a race. Psychologically, it's beneficial because you can bank a 6-hour ride. Physically, it can be... It won't advance you, or it could undermine what you're trying to achieve. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the volume of training that I was doing was probably a lot less than what people may have imagined. And in fact, at the outset, I was training for Olympic distance.
So maybe explain just a little bit about Brett at that time. So he's quite a quirky character, and he does have this reputation for sort of flogging his athletes a little bit, rightly or wrongly. But you found that actually the volume he was giving you could cope with. When you
it was challenging physically. I won't deny that. It was definitely challenging physically. What was more challenging was the psychological changes he was trying to make. That's what I found much more difficult. The physical training, I wasn't doing nearly the same volume as athletes like Bella Comfort or Belinda Granger or Hilary Biscay. They were quite high volume athletes, and they could withstand that. My body physically isn't as capable of withstanding that high volume, and I don't necessarily need to do it. So the emphasis for me was very much on high quality strength work and interval work, and less on kind of logging, high volume training. But it was psychologically, I think, where Brett made the difference. When I went to him, it was an anathema to rest. For me, resting was absolutely tantamount to weakness. So to have a rest day was like saying I'd failed. If someone said to me, "Have you run today?" and I said no, I felt like a complete failure. And coupled with that, I couldn't rest my mind. So if I overanalyzed everything. I overanalyzed if I had a bad race, if I had a bad session, I thought about everything. And he said to me basically that you have to be able to rest your mind and you have to be able to rest your body. And for me, that was so incredibly challenging. And unless I got a handle on my brain, I would never have achieved what I did.
So on reflection and given all your experience, and I imagine most people out here are sort of working age group athletes, do you feel that the training that you did, you could only have done by virtue of the fact that you were a professional athlete and then Brett eventually made sure that you rested between sessions? Because I think a lot of people will read the magazines, look online and go, well, you have to run 90k a week, you have to be biking all of these miles, and yet they're trying to fit in a work and family life around that.
You do the best in the context of your life, and that's what people forget. You're the best athlete that you can possibly be in the context of your life. I was a professional athlete, and I saw training in a totally holistic sense. So for me, I was training my body to be the best it could be. So for me, training was, yes, it was swim, bike and run. It was strength and conditioning. It was massage. It was physio. It was nutrition and hydration. It was putting my feet up. It was getting enough sleep. That was training. So you can log as many hours or miles as you like, swim, bike and running, but unless you take care of the minutiae, you will never ever achieve your potential. As a professional, I had that luxury. I could train 4 or 6 hours a day. I had 18 hours a day to rest. 18 hours to rest. So I could take care of myself in the entirety. Amateur athletes just don't have that luxury. So you have to fit triathlon into the context of your life rather than trying to fit your life into the context of triathlon. So you have to look at your lifestyle. You have to look at when you're working, what hours you're working, what your family commitments are, and slot in your must-have sessions into the available slots. But also, you also need to see rest as part of training and not an add-on or a luxury. It's absolutely fundamental because training breaks your body. That's what it does. That's why you train. You train to stress your body. But unless you rest, your body can never rebuild. It can never recover. So you continually stress it. It can take it for a little while, and then eventually, bang! Oh dear, I've got a stress fracture. I wonder why. And I've been there, and I've done it, and I've suffered from that as well. So I speak from experience, kind of not martyrdom, and it amazes me how many athletes do not rest sufficiently because they're scared to.
Now, you were about 7 years professional. Over that time, you've been building your endurance base, layering it on year. Can you give us some specifics in the way your training changed over those years? And maybe also relate to some of perhaps the strength and conditioning stuff. Eventually, when you retired, Dave Scott was sort of coach and advisor. Dave's huge on the strength and conditioning side of it, so could maybe bring that in as a factor.
My training evolved I was at 5 years as a professional athlete. It evolved, and it's very easy when you're successful to do what you've always done. Especially someone like me, you find a formula that works, you want to stick to it. But as an athlete, you're constantly evolving, and your training has to evolve to meet that, to adapt to that. My training changed subtly in my move from Brett to Dave. Brett took me as far as I think I could go. Dave nuanced me as an athlete. He was very, very clever in the way in which he did things, because I'm a creature of habit and I resisted change, and I wanted to do the sessions that Brett had set me. And so I pushed back, and Dave slowly integrated new sessions into my program, new ways of doing things. He further reduced the volume, and he upped the intensity. By which I mean, for example, my brick session, rather than just running off the bike and running and just at tempo pace, I'd go off the bike, I'd do between 14 and 16k off a 3-hour ride, but that would be at what we call swing pace. So I'd do 500 metres or a k at faster than race pace, then I'd do a k at race pace, then I'd do 500 metres or a k at faster than race pace. And so you're practicing race pace, but also testing your body off the back of a hard ride, and that's something I'd never done with Brett. The other thing that Dave introduced was the treadmill.
Also, sorry, just to interject, so 16 kilometres at race pace and then faster than race pace off a hard bike.
Yes.
That's a tough session.
It's a tough session. That was Wednesday. Thursday was a double bike day and a swim. Thursday was always hard.
Good to see that you reduced it.
He did reduce the volume. But Dave introduced the treadmill, which revolutionised my running, because it forced me to increase my leg turnover. My leg turnover was already quite fast, but to be a good runner off the bike, you want to have quite a rapid footfall. And so the treadmill encouraged that. So we both did speed work on kind of 0.5% gradient, and then hills on the treadmill. But Dave also introduced strength and conditioning. It was something that Brett disagreed with fundamentally. However, I believe for longevity, everyone should incorporate strength and conditioning into their program, but it needs to be targeted. There's no point in coming into a gym and just lifting a few weights and hoping that you're going to develop some kind of inner physical strength. You need to be assessed, you need to ascertain what your strengths and weaknesses were. So my weaknesses were particularly on my right side. My knee fell in not because my knee fell in, but my knee fell in because my glutes and my hamstrings were so weak. I'd always get slower at the back end of a marathon. Well, you think, that's natural. Well, it's not. You didn't feel energy depleted. I didn't feel like I had a glycogen deficiency. My form had gone. My form had gone because my hamstrings and my glutes were incapable of carrying me. Dave recognised that, and he saw that I looked like I was sitting down on the last 10k of the marathon. So we need to work on that. So I had some really targeted strength and conditioning work to give me the strength, especially at the back end of the marathon, and it worked. And I was able to negative split that to 44, not only because of the running training that I'd done, or the swimming or the biking, but also because of the strength and conditioning. And that's one other thing to remember. I know I'm rambling, but hopefully it's useful. Is that people compartmentalise our sport, right? So people come to me and they say, Chrissie, I want to be a faster runner. Can you tell me what I need to do in my run training? And I say to them, well, what's your position on the bike? What do you eat on the bike? What equipment are you using on the bike? What's your bike setup like? What bike training are you doing? And they say, no, Chrissie, you don't understand. I want to be a faster runner. And I say, I do understand, and that's why I'm talking about your bike. I was a faster runner, not necessarily only because of what I was doing in terms of run training, but because of what I did on the bike. Why didn't I wear an aero helmet? It would have made me go faster on the bike. Of course it would have done. I get really claustrophobic, it makes me anxious, and I get dehydrated because I dissipate a lot of heat from my head. So when does that dehydration hit you? Not on the bike, when you've gone 5 minutes faster. It hits you at 30k on the marathon when you're walking. And you're saying, why am I so dehydrated? Oh, I'll start chugging water. It's too late. You're walking on the marathon because of the decisions that you made on the bike. And we're triathletes, we're not swimmers, we're not bikers, and we're not runners. And I think that's a really, really important thing to remember. In the context of training, what you do on the run will help or hinder the other disciplines. So you need to see it in the entirety.
Right, conscious that we want to save a bit of time for Q&A at the end, so we're going to move on to race day.
Yes.
Now, when you got into the sport, you were relatively unknown. You were quite unknowing. That first time you went to Hawaii, you didn't really know any of the other girls. I think Brett said to you, don't worry about what anyone's doing. Pretty much from that day on, though, you had a big target on your back. You were the hunted. So that kind of must affect your mentality, I suppose, going in. But what are the key things that you put in place for race day? And for everybody out there, what would be the key things to think about?
My race strategy evolved, and I think everyone should remember that. I think people go into races expecting perfection. That's not going to happen. It's an unrealistic expectation to go into a race and think that everything's going to go according to plan. It doesn't for me, and it won't for you. Things will go wrong. Your goggles will get knocked off. You'll get a cramp. You'll get a flat tyre. You'll get a stitch on the run. Something will happen. That's racing, and that's what makes your race perfect. Because hopefully you'll overcome those imperfections perfectly. That's why my last race was the best race I'd ever run. Not because everything went perfectly, it was absolutely horrific. But I overcame it all perfectly. And that's what I'm so proud of. So the first thing I realised was that racing in itself is a learning experience. You're always learning and always evolving, and my strategy evolved. Going into the race, I utilised a lot of the techniques that I practiced in training psychologically. And I think the psychological side of sport is one that's overlooked, and people have their logbooks of swim, bike, run, tick, tick, tick. They don't have a logbook for mental training, and then they panic or they worry when things don't go according to plan. Well, that's because they haven't developed the tools. But they are tools, and you can develop them. You can develop mental strength. So I got through the last race in Kona, not only because of, the latent physical strength that I had, but also because of the psychological tools that I'd developed. So whether that's this ability to disassociate my mind from my body and take my mind into a very, very happy place, which I've had to do in training, whether it's breaking the session down. We've all had hard sessions and we've thought we haven't been able to do that, so you break it down. We used to do 40 times 100 in the swimming pool at race pace. Bang, 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 bang. Start that final race thinking, oh my God, I'm racing for 9 hours. I just think I've got to get to that swim buoy. And then why do you think I'm smiling when I get out the swim? Because it's awesome. I've gotten out the swim. And then the bike ride is 40k. I can always manage 40k. And then the marathon is 4 lots of 10k and a bit of change. So you break it down. When the going gets really tough, you break it down to the person in front or the aid stations or whatever. But you don't necessarily see it in the entirety. And that was really important to me. Having songs in my head, that's very important. I tend to count repetitively over and over again. Before a race, actually, I used to have a Kona playlist, which is really embarrassing, so no one's ever going to get hold of it. It's got Lion King soundtrack. Embarrassing songs. But I used to run. I used to train on a Lee Drive and on the Queen K or whatever race at Roth I was doing, and I used to listen to my iPod with the playlist. And then I'd identify landmarks with songs so that when I raced, that's what I heard. when I was racing. I heard those songs, and they meant something to me, and they mattered to me. So I think that those are psychological tools that we can all use in training, that then apply them in racing. But it's too late on race day to realise you haven't got them. They've got to be developed in training. But you mentioned the pressure. We all feel pressure. I felt pressure, in every race that I did. We all put pressure on ourselves. That's a beautiful thing about sport. We're challenging ourselves. If it's not a challenge, you don't feel any pressure, and it's not worth doing it. So,
do you still feel pressure now? When you go out?
Yes, of course I do. But you manage it. Everyone gets nervous. Everyone suffers from lapses in motivation, and everyone feels the pressure. But there are techniques to cope with it. Leaning on other people is really important to me. Watching videos of people that have overcome adversity. Before Kona 2011, I read Sir Steve Redgrave's book, and I realised what he'd been through to get to his 5 gold medals. And I thought, wow, if you can do it, then I can do it too. So that really helps, give me a boost. Perspective is it's so important. Triathlon is important, but the world is not going to end. And the millions and millions and millions of people in this world don't care if I win the World Championship or not.
I'm not sure about that.
But at the end of the day, it's a sport, and it's supposed to be fun. And the world is not going to fall apart if I do or if I don't win. Yes, it matters. Of course it matters. I want to do justice to myself and all the training. But I think we all need to keep it in perspective, and having that perspective helped me cope with the pressure.
Just on Ironman races, second. Anyone who's done one, well, I guess you would know anyway, but it's an incredibly early start of the morning. It's sort of pitch black, and you get out there and it's all eerie. When does race day start for you? Is it like flick a switch, right, race mode, race day starts? Or is it the night before, the morning?
Oh, what? So if I've got Kona?
Yeah.
January.
Right, okay.
Yeah. No, I say that in all seriousness. Every minute of every single day from the end of my off-season was dedicated to Kona. Everything I did was geared towards that goal. And
did that become a more important goal the more times you won it? And then after 2010, when you had to put out late, did that become even more critical?
Yeah, I mean, I had three A goals, if you call them that, in the season. I always wanted to do 3 Ironman races, so I had 3 kind of peaks. But, Kona's a big daddy, and that's what you train for. But, race day, training for race day starts right then, and everything from then is geared towards getting me in the best shape possible. In terms of tapering for race day, I tapered less than people would think. Compared to the majority of age group triathletes, I was doing around 30 hours a week. So if you dramatically reduce the volume, you will go into the race with fatigue. So you should reduce the volume proportionate to what you do ordinarily. You reduce the junk almost completely, and you keep the intensity. So, for example, the brick session, if the race is on a Saturday, I might do the brick session on a Tuesday or Wednesday. That would be a 2-hour ride into a 25-minute run, but I'd do 5 lots of 3 minutes hard in that run. And then the penultimate day, so say the race is on a Saturday, the Thursday is a complete rest day. Complete rest day, you have obligations and professional that day, usually the press conference, pro brief and things, but that's a total rest day. The day before the race, I do a 2K swim with about 300 metres of effort, 25 metres, breaking down 25 and 50s. Hour and a quarter bike, again with some 3-4 minute efforts in, and then a 25-minute run with some what we call strides. So 30 second, 1 minute efforts. So that's the day before the race. I always do the bike earlier in the day, because if you have a mechanical, you've got the rest of the day to deal with it. If you leave the bike right until just before you're racking it and you end up with a flat tyre or something like that, then, you know, panic sets in. So I always did the bike early. I used to have dinner around 6-ish, 6:30-ish. Used to go to bed around 9:30. You never sleep well before a race, ever. So don't expect to, and don't stress if you don't. You know, the key is to bank as much sleep in the kind of weeks before the race rather than expect a good 8 hours the night of the race. If the race starts at 6:30, I'd be up at around 3:45, 4. I'd have breakfast 2.25 hours before the race.
You're happy bunny then? You chatting away? Or
no, I
think that answered that.
I'm not a particularly pleasant person to be around in the maybe 2 days before a race. Not because I'm snappy, but I just tend to withdraw into myself. So I don't tend to be that communicative. So I wouldn't say I was a nasty person to be around, but I'd just say I was pretty dull. And yeah, I tend to withdraw. I tend to do a lot of visualization, a lot of relaxation techniques, a bit of self-massage, you know, videos, reading, things like that. So I just tend to keep myself to myself as much as possible in the kind of days and even hours before the race. Even, you know, before the race starts, I take myself off and just sit there, listen to some music, just try and be away from, you know, the noise and the hassle. I know a lot of amateur athletes like to get their wetsuits on about 3 hours before the start, which isn't very good if you need the toilet. But
not in a way, but not wetsuit swimming.
It's true, but we, you know, it's important to be prepared. But, you know, take yourself off, have that little bit of time. Don't be in, you know, the heat of the race, you know, too early on.
Okay, let's. So we're here for the launch of 33 Shape Gel. So let's move on and talk a little bit about nutrition.
Yep.
What do you understand by good nutrition? What would be your definition? Bless you.
Bless you. It's evolved. It's literally a moving feast. And my concept of nutrition has changed from when I was a non-athlete and started running to lose weight, developed an eating disorder, had a very distorted view of nutrition and fueling and body image, only to find running and that to be my saviour, because it enabled me to get a better handle on fueling for performance. So I read a lot about what I believe I needed to do in order to be able to fuel for performance. And that's evolved into my sports nutrition strategy that exists today. My sports nutrition strategy is my daily diet. And that's what people forget. People talk about sports nutrition and they think energy drink, gels, and a few cardboard type bars, right? That's not. Your sports nutrition for your race day performance is what you eat every day. So my daily diet is wholesome, natural, close to the source as possible foods. So I'm fortunate that I don't have any intolerances. I eat what I call kind of complex carbs, so a lot of quinoa and spelt, wild rice, not a lot of white stuff, which is essentially carbohydrates with all the good stuff taken out. So not a lot of white rice, not a lot of white pasta, not a lot of white bread. So a lot of unrefined carbs. I eat a lot of lean meats, so a lot of fish, poultry and chicken, loads of nuts, loads of seeds, fresh fruit and vegetables, eggs. I eat a healthy, well-balanced diet. It's not rocket science. And as an athlete, I supplemented that with what is better known as sports nutrition products. So, and I say that really carefully. So it was a supplement, and I think there's a misconception one that we concur with, is that people are overusing these products. People think that professional athletes are sucking on energy drinks and gels every day in training. We're not. We use them, but we use them really, really sparingly. I could count on my two hands the number of times I had an energy gel when I was doing my long run, which was up to 32 kilometres. I didn't do it on anything. I did my long run on a couple of rice cakes with peanut butter and honey and a cup of coffee, and that's what I did my long run on. And people wonder why I'm fuel efficient. Well, it's about training your body to be so. In a race, I used energy drinks and I used gels, but I used them so sparingly, and I knew what worked for me. I knew what was palatable for me, but it wasn't the kind of foundation for my nutritional strategy. And so I believe that race day nutrition starts long before race day. People, it's almost like a crux to just lean on these products and hope that they're going to give you the sustenance that you need, but they're addictive. And the more you take them, the more you need. So, for example, if I was to go out and bike ride and every 30 minutes I took a gel, that's what your body is always going to need when you go for that bike ride. Because you're not training your body to know any different. Our bodies are trainable. And I trained my body to be very fuel efficient. And I believe that one should stick mainly to whole foods and use sports nutrition sparingly.
Okay. So, what drove you to team up with 33 Shake and to be here tonight?
Because our philosophies matched.
Right.
I was sick and tired of reading a list of ingredients I didn't understand. And that goes for sports nutrition and it goes for my daily life. You make a Bakewell tart at home. You make a Bakewell tart out of butter, ground almonds, maybe a bit of raspberry jam, some sugar and eggs. You buy a whatever brand Bakewell tart, it hasn't got any eggs in it, or it's got reconstituted egg white. It hasn't got any butter. It's never seen an almond. It's never seen a piece of fruit. But it's called a Bakewell tart, but it's not. It's a chemical experiment. And I got sick of it. And I just started to read a lot more around the research that had been undertaken in order to justify the sports nutrition products that people were using, and I found it to be somewhat hollow. And I also got increasingly concerned about the number of people that spoke to me about just the things that you asked for show of hands on. How many people have gone to the toilet in the bushes? Well, I have. How many people have suffered from cramps? Well, I have. How many people have vomited? Yeah, of course. And well, that's not natural, it's not normal, and it's not part and parcel of sport, and it shouldn't be. So we just started talking about whether there was a different solution, and I've started using the products. I love the products, and so we decided I wanted to team up with a company that I believed in.
Thank you. Right, I'm just going to ask you one final one, and then we'll throw it open for some questions and answers. Just on coaching, triathlon's a fairly expensive sport. So do people need to invest and have a coach? Do you think that's an important part of it?
Much depends on what stage you're at, and what your goals are, and what your background is, and what your experience is in the sport. What I would say is that training needs to be tailored to you and your life. And a coach can be very, very valuable in enabling you to do that. A coach can be very valuable in taking the weight off your shoulders. For me, a coach was very, very important because it meant I ceased worrying. It was a revelation to me when Brett said, "You haven't got to worry anymore, you just follow the order." And as a fiercely independent person, that was so scary, but it was also so liberating. I'm like, I don't have to think about whether or not I'm doing the right session. I just place my trust in that person, and I follow that order, and I trust in his judgment that he'll get me from A to B. And I think that's really important. Other people need a coach to motivate themselves. I never needed that. I'm a highly motivated individual, so I could follow a training plan even if I set myself that training plan. But for some people, being accountable to a coach, is very, very important. What is important is that the athlete empowers themselves. That even if you have a coach, empower yourself. Understand why you're doing what you're doing. And that was very, very important, and I think that's why my relationship with Dave was so successful, because not only did I follow his order, but he explained to me why I was following whatever order I'd been given. And I think that's very, very important, that we all empower ourselves to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So that's not to say don't get a coach, but have a coach that can explain those things to you. And obviously not all coaches are made equal, so you're better off having no coach than having a shit coach. And there are a lot of the latter out there, unfortunately. It's all too easy to pay £300 and get your British triathlon licence. It's less easy to have the experience in being able to read and understand an athlete. And that's absolutely key. And that's why my coaches were so successful, is because they understood me. They could read me like a book. I used to walk on the pool deck, on the pool side, and Brett used to say, "You're hanging, you're not getting in the water." And I hadn't done a thing, I just walked on the pool deck. But he knew me, he could read me like an absolute book. And Dave is the same, and that's a talent that they don't teach you at the British Triathlon Level 1 coaching course. That's not to say all coaches are bad, but I think, make sure you've got a good one if you have one at all.
Have you got to get on with your coach?
You've got to have a good relationship with your coach. My relationship with Brett was very challenging for me, especially at the start. But I came to respect him, and we got on well as coach and athlete, but also as friends towards the end. And Dave and I likewise, where we get on, we were great professionally, but we also got on personally, and I think that's really important, that you have that connection, because your goal is ultimately in their hands, and I think it's important that you have a strong relationship, a strong open relationship, and an honest relationship with whoever you choose as your coach, and also not to be scared to change coaches as well. It's often nerve-wracking as an athlete, whether you're professional or amateur, to change a coach and to say that's not working for me. But like I said, it's it's a constant state of evolution, training and racing, and what you need for from a coach in the first few years might not be what you need in the latter stages. And the best coaches in the world would be the ones that said, "I've done all I can with you," and off you go.
Thank you, Chrissie.